Welcome to Conversations with Educators. I'm your host, Jerome Ellison, and today I have a special guest, Naim Sanders. Thank you, Naim, for coming on the show.
Jerome, thank you so much for having me. It's truly a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you. I like to get started with a quick game. This one is called Start, Bench, or Cut. So it's like a team, right? You start the
I love
best
it.
thing, you bench the second best thing, and you cut the third best thing. So I'll give you
Gotcha.
three options. So think back to your experience as a kid in school. So which one would you start, bench, or cut? Your elementary school experience, your middle school experience, or your high school experience, and why?
I will start the high school experience,
Hmm.
cut the middle school, bench elementary.
Why? Why would you bench? Why would you cut the? You said cut the middle school.
Middle school are just awkward years, man, and development and growth. And then you don't like anybody when you're in middle school, and it's always that insecurity and then things
Yeah.
going on. High school was the best. Loved, enjoyed high school. Had a wonderful experience with not only friends but also teachers and playing sports and engaging things like that. Elementary school set the foundation in my love. I think a lot of passion for actually loving school and wanting to go in education. But those middle school years, your hormones are up and down. You hate
So
yourself
true.
on Monday, love yourself on Tuesday.
So true. I was a dean in the middle school, and the type of issues you deal with on a regular basis,
Yes,
because kids are going through those hormones and they're figuring themselves
yes,
out. Such a wide range. So that's so true. So true.
absolutely.
But the great thing is that kid, you come in as one person, and by the time you leave in eighth grade, you're totally different person in those 3 years. So you
How
really
they
can
grow
impact how they grow. Yeah.
very quickly. So I
Hmm.
applaud you for even taking on that challenge, because a lot of people want to stay away from middle school.
That's true. So true. Everyone tells me that. So true. All right. So here's some reflective questions. So why did you become an educator, teacher, and then a principal? What got you into the field?
What's interesting is I wanted to earlier on, I wanted to go into counseling because I knew I wanted to help people to some degree. And then my senior year of high school, I did volunteer hours at an elementary school. And I'll never forget, it came so natural to me to be in the
Mm,
classroom around those kids that once I got that experience, I never gotten away from it. It's what I wanted to do. And it was really the ability to impact and influence young minds. I hadn't quite understood the concept of the actual instruction because I wasn't exposed to it, but just to
mhm.
be around the young people and knowing that you can make a difference and how they saw you was
Yes.
really one that was just one rewarding, and I wanted to do it. So that was really good. To being a principal, to be honest with you, was more of a calling.
Mm,
My first year of teaching, the principal would leave me in charge, but no other teachers argued it. They were
oh.
like, okay. And so I remember her telling me one day, she's like, "You're going to be a principal." And I didn't quite understand at the time. I was looking at her job like, no, I'll pass. I'll just teach. But when you have a love and passion for young people, and honestly, when you have a love and passion for other teachers, you
Hmm.
want to be able to do more. And I saw being a principal as a way of being able to support not only children and families, but also educators too. And
Hmm.
I've never looked back. And like I said, I really believe it's one of the greatest jobs in the world.
I love that. I love that. So true. So true. It's one of the greatest jobs, but it's also one of the most difficult jobs. So that goes into
By
my next
far.
question. What has been the difficult challenge, most challenging thing for you as a principal? As a principal.
I think over the years, coming to the harsh reality that you can't save everyone, especially if you have the mindset to try to help everyone at all times within your power, and even sometimes when they don't realize it. When you have to face that harsh reality, it's a hard pill to swallow
Mm,
because out of all my students, I love them, and I know that I may lose some, and you never want to be the one to decide that. So that one is probably, I would say, definitely the most painful, knowing that you can't save them all. And I think the next one is sometimes just dealing with the politics that
mm,
exists in education that matriculates its way down to the building and then into the classroom. When you see teachers who are working tirelessly
mm.
on the front line, doing what they can, and then you get some mandate or some policy that was written by someone who has never stepped foot in the classroom, and you as a principal have to be the filter of that to try to the translator. That could be challenging too. So it's, don't shoot the messenger, but here's the message.
Oh
That's
man.
probably one of the challenges I would say being a principal presents.
Those two right there. I tell everyone that, especially for as a black man, in my experience, I can
Yes,
say the first one of being an educator, because you get into the field, you want to impact everyone,
very
but
much so.
realizing that you can only do as much as you can do, and every
Right,
kid at that point may not be at the point to have an
right.
impact on them. That's a lot to take on because your heart
It
is in
is.
it, and sometimes you can get your heart broken because you're trying to
Yep.
save everyone. And then the other thing about the system has these protocols, these mandates that you have to fulfill, and sometimes they go against your values. Honestly,
Right.
sometimes your heart may be saying, "This is what I want to do," but the position you're in, you have to do this, and trying to figure out a way to balance that as a leader in the school and support your teachers through that and communicate to your teachers exactly what you want them to do and exactly what your values are in that situation is a tough
Absolutely.
task. Tough task.
And I try to tell young teachers and educators that oftentimes when you look at saving kids, your job, you have to look at it like you're planting seeds and you water them. You may not as an educator see them grow over time, but sometimes when you can pass them to the next person and they're watering them too, and like a flower it sprouts and it grows. So that's sometimes a challenge. I'll even say being an elementary school teacher and educator, you may not see what that looks like on the outside when that child gets into high school and beyond. But your job is just to plant those seeds and water them. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe hopefully someone else, the next person that comes along, will continue to nurture it, water too, and then it continues to grow. And that's the one part. It kind of makes it a little bit easier for teachers to understand. Your job may not to save them all. It could be to spark a fire, to get things started in the child, to plant the seeds, and oftentimes that's enough.
That's it. That perspective is everything right there. That's it. That's it. It's a process, right? And we're all on the same
It
team as
is
educators. And you have to have faith. You
absolutely
have to have that faith that what you're doing, you do as much as you can and you live with it and hope that eventually it'll work itself out. That's so
very much
great.
so, very
So
much
great.
so.
So on top of that, what has been the proudest moment you've had as a principal? Something you think about all the time and it puts a smile on your face.
Honestly, I think we're going through right now as we hopefully are on the back end of this COVID crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Just the resilience of educators connecting not only in my building but in my district, from around the state and in the country, being able to persevere and get through this. No one knew this time last year we would be in this situation. We couldn't have guessed in a million years. And so I think what it's done, it's stretched all of us to become better
Mm-hmm.
by force or
Mm-hmm.
voluntary, but regardless, to become better and improve our craft. So being able to navigate these waters that the pandemic has caused, and seeing my teachers sometimes go into crisis mode, to panic mode, which we've all been there, and being able
Yeah.
to support them and still see them overcome, and not to mention just being able to see, in spite of these challenges, how students
Mm.
have been able to grow, and to also be able to be innovative and to adapt. The adaptability has been a huge thing. And I think we've learned a lot where when we return, things won't quite ever be the same because of these experiences, nor should they have to be. But I definitely think it's one of those things that what we're going through. I don't know too many principals who've led through a pandemic. I don't know any
Mm.
teachers who taught through a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost from the get-go, we were building the plane as we were flying it. Like I hope
That's a fact. That's so true. So
and so
real.
there's so many lessons, but I think all, I think the world saw what teachers do and got a
Mm.
bigger, more in-depth understanding of what teachers do. And it also allowed teachers to get a greater understanding of where students are coming from when you're on these Zoom meetings and calls and you're right into the homes of students, and then students being the home. So there's so much intimacy in a good way that was created from this experience. But we're living in it. It's not over yet fully, but we're in it as far as the greatest challenge.
Ooh, that's so true. I hope the system, educators, everyone takes the time to really sit and reflect on these times, because any
Yes.
any experience like this, I feel like is always a teachable moment, right? We go through things
Mhm.
for a situation to learn from it, right? So there's so
Very much
much
so.
to learn. We've learned and try to learn on the fly, like you said. But even if we sit back and reflect, we can learn so much more,
Very
so
much
much
so.
about the system, about diversity and equity,
Mhm.
about the digital divide, about poverty, about social
Yes.
emotional learning, about so many things that we can sit and reflect and learn and make the adjustments to the system, to the educational system that will benefit us all moving forward. And I think if we let this moment pass where we don't sit and make some changes after this pandemic, then we're losing the opportunity to really build a better system after this pandemic.
I agree. One example I try to give teachers is it's amazing how much students have been engaged and have learned, and we didn't have any state formal assessments, right? So sometimes when you want to know what students know, just ask a teacher. maybe sometimes we don't have to look at those state assessments. Ask a teacher. So being able to understand things like that can, I think, make a world of a difference.
I love that because people always talk about the learning loss, right? And it's always someone who's not in the educational field talking about it and saying, whether it's a parent, whether it's someone in the media, ask a teacher. The teachers know. We can compare kids from 2 years ago to the kids that we have now and where they are developmentally and see the real impact that this has had to them. And oftentimes our voice isn't a part of the conversation. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like I created this platform, just to get the teachers and educators' perspective that's often lost in the conversation about educational reform.
I definitely agree. And this is why this platform is so important. It's necessary, and it has to be a voice of the educator. So
thank you. So that leads perfectly into my next question. What is one thing that you would either add or change or do more of or less of in the educational system based on your experience?
I would honestly change or improve, let me say, the way we educated teachers and principals. Let me put educators in there.
Okay.
I think when you look at a lot of it, it's a 4-year degree or a lot of 2-year programs that teachers are forced to endure and go through. Oftentimes, those courses are based on theory and they're very cerebral. And I'm not saying they're not necessary, but I think we need to consider other trains of thought. So for instance, I firmly believe that experience is the best teacher.
Yes.
So instead of teachers spending 3 years in the classroom or 4 years in the classroom, how about they spend 1 year in the classroom and the other 3 years teaching? Mm-hmm. So you're doing more on-site practicums, getting those experiences. And not only experiences in the classroom setting, but in diverse settings. So you may have a teacher in the inner city, in the suburbs, in the private sector, in the charter school sector, in rural. That way, that teacher has a clear understanding specifically of what are some of the demands I'm going to be going into. When I watch young teachers come in, they're educated, they're passionate, they're motivated, but sometimes they hit that brick wall because they were never prepared mentally for what they were going to experience. And I think we did a good job in education and training teachers, and again, principals as well. I think that would help them out a lot because every environment is unique and presents its own different set of dilemmas. And so when you strategically focus your energy and time in trying to address those specific issues that you're passionate about, I think, man, it'll close the gap wholeheartedly that you often get. And I think a lot of times it will refrain teachers from burning out so quickly and deciding to quit when you look at the statistics of the amount of teachers that quit in their first 5 years. We want to give them a heads up what we're going into. So I think that's a big one. And I think really, and I'll say this more so from a leadership standpoint, we need to do better at supporting teachers in the social emotional learning for themselves. It's important when we talk in terms of students because we have to, but when you think in terms of what teachers experience, I think us as administrators have to be more mindful, supportive, and may even need greater training in how to provide services and supports, motivation, and all those things for teachers on a regular basis, whether through words, through actions, through behaviors and deeds. And I think when you look at, when I came out and got my license many years ago, that wasn't even a course. That was just something either you do. I had good coaches, and I quote them a lot. I read some books. But as an administrator, you have to be able to pour into your teachers so your teachers can pour into the students. So I really think that that needs to be looked at too in regards to how are we motivating? How are we motivating and supporting teachers because they need that? It's a hard work. It's a hard job.
Definitely. And I think that's another one of the things that came out from this pandemic, the burnout from teachers losing their passion, losing a lot of educators through these times. And because we don't have the tools built in to socially, emotionally support teachers during this time. So I think that, that's very important. This segment is called Each One Teach One. So if you had a chance to give one piece of advice And you gave so many great pieces of advice already, but to a new principal, a first year principal, what advice would you give them to help them in their first year?
Learn to study people. You are in a human service field. In the midst of demands, data, facilities, never lose sight of your humanity. Education is a human service field. You can study the best pedagogies, instructional strategies, analyze and disaggregate data, but you better understand the needs of people. And I think that's often gets overlooked. So study people.
Yes, I love that. That's so true. Last segment is called Choose Your Teacher Wisely. So I want you to pick one. It can be one person, one book, one video. It can be any one thing that has educated you and pushed you to become a better person. One thing that has educated you. What would it be?
I'm a reader, man. So I think if I gave these two, so it's hard. One, I think a lot of times learning from teachers and students, watching them, that's been a huge. I've been just as I observe and watch and study and navigate how they navigate in their experiences. And I think the second one is books. I'm a huge reader, and so oftentimes I don't get to you can't talk to everyone all the time, but I like to read books from other fields. And it's interesting whether you look at business world, motivation, those books. So much of it applies to education. So I love to just read a good book that's just talking about leadership, and then seeing how it applies directly to my role. So those are really teachers, students, and then also just reading books.
I love that. I love that. Thank you, Naim, for coming on the show. You shared so much great insight. I appreciate you for what work that you do and for coming on the show. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you too, brother. Keep up the good work, man, and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. Stay blessed. And remember, education over everything. Bye.